As we've just heard, Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern has a full week of appointments ahead of her at the UN summit in New York this week. Here to elaborate on the significance of her schedule when it comes to New Zealand's geopolitical priorities is Otago University Professor Robert Patman. Good morning, Robert.
Good morning, Hayley.
So first off, what are New Zealand's geopolitical priorities?
Well, at the moment, New Zealand's facing a very challenging foreign policy environment. New Zealand, because it's a small country, is critically dependent on what's called an international rules-based order. Rules are there to protect the weaker and rather than the stronger. And what we've seen in the last couple of years is that some of the reliable upholders of that rules-based order have begun to sort of disconnect themselves from that order. You've got the Brexit people or the Brexit movement in the UK, and you now have the Trump administration, which is attacking some of the institutions which this country holds dear and depends on.
How much will this affect New Zealand? I mean, you've got the biggest power, world power, the US pulling out of things like the Paris Agreement, the Human Rights Council, the Iran nuclear agreement. So they've pulled out of all of these things. How is that going to affect New Zealand? Well,
it does, because in a sense, what Mr. Trump is doing, it's not just those agreements, which in some cases are some distance from New Zealand, but in addition, the Trump administration is attacking things like the WTO. Now, the WTO, the World Trade Organization, has been critical for New Zealand. We've been involved in 6 trade disputes since 1995. Thanks to the WTO, we've won all 6 of them through an independent disputes resolution mechanism. So for a small country, which is a global trader, which is New Zealand, we trade with more than 100 countries globally, we actually need those rules to make sure it's a more level playing field. If institutions like the WTO are eroded, it means basically it becomes a self-help system where the biggest are best placed to help themselves. And that's basically what the Trump administration, it keeps saying, it's not that we're against multilateralism, but we just believe in sovereignty more. Well, the problem is, of course, some countries are more sovereign than others.
Yes. Now, so obviously Jacinda's going to be talking trade with a few countries. Possibly, will she be concentrating on the EU?
I think she'll want to get an update on the progress of the free trade agreement with the EU, which is very important, worth more than $20 billion to this country. It's a huge market, more than 500 million people. It's the most prosperous single market in the world. We have a big stake in getting that agreement. I'm sure she'll be consulting with EU leaders about that. And actually, not just the trade deal, but she'll be consulting with the EU. Germany and France, for example, are very uneasy about the direction of the Trump administration. What we've seen in the last 2 years is a divergence of worldview between New Zealand and some of its old partners like the UK and the United States. And increasingly, I think the Prime Minister, Ms Ardern, will be looking to establish a rapport and dialogue and deepen a dialogue with those countries which share New Zealand's worldview, which is based on an international rules-based system.
There's also been some talk about her appearances on the Colbert Show, CNN and the Today Show. Is this just sprinkling stardust, or is this quite important?
I think it's critical. I don't think it's showboating. I think it's taking full advantage, and it's a compliment to the Prime Minister that she's been invited onto these programmes. In politics, as in other spheres of life, it's not just about talking to the converted, it's about reaching a wider audience. It's important the Prime Minister's addressing the General Assembly, that's critical, but it's also important that as Prime Minister of this country, New Zealand is fully represented in the consciousness of the wider American public, and what better way to do it than through these sort of popular TV programmes.
Thank you very much for your time this morning, Robert Patman, our foreign affairs expert.